It occurs to me, Andrew, you raised the question, why do architects continue to insist on wanting to talk about cities when we clearly no longer have very much expertise in making cities, or rather we've been superseded by individuals who have more expertise? Why do architects continue to insist on inserting themselves into discussions of urban, ecological, and in some cases landscape matters? A few things. Recently we've had both Orhan and Stan Allen here at the school. Stan made the observation that the reason landscape, and I'm paraphrasing broadly, is interesting to architects, for instance, landscape urbanism, is that it provides us with a sort of panoply of other ways of operating that are synthetic, not object-based, that are time-based, that are rather than finite, and that are integrative rather than singular. So that's Stan's point. Orhan said something very interesting to me, which was that little by little, the lead consultant on most large-scale urban projects tends to be the landscape architect. So it used to be the architect, but more often than not, the prime consultant now is a landscape architect, and architects are in fact sometimes subcontractors or consultants in that discussion. So those are sort of two observations. But I wanted to bring up the term, the MacGuffin. I was just Wikipediaing it because I was sort of thinking about maybe urbanism is the kind of MacGuffin for architects. If you don't know what MacGuffin is, it's a plot device that Alfred Hitchcock developed. Essentially, it's a plot element that captures the viewer's attention or drives the plot of a work of fiction. But the specific nature of the MacGuffin is not important to the plot, such that anything that serves as a motivation only serves its purpose. The MacGuffin can sometimes be ambiguous, completely undefined, generic, or left open to interpretation. Common in films, especially thrillers, the MacGuffin, as always, is the central focus of the film. The first act later declines in importance as the struggles and motivations of the characters play out. Sometimes the MacGuffin is often forgotten by the end of the film. So I wanted to sort of open with that because I think that urbanism, in a way, as Andrew points out, for at least a group of colleagues here at SCI-Arc, continues to be something like a MacGuffin. It's a little puzzling why we continue to talk about the city, or why we have a desire to engage the city. And certainly when we talk about new urbanisms, I think one place to start might be exactly where the role of the architect is in that discourse. By the way, Andrew, not everything is coincidental in sci-fi. You may know that all three of you have worked together in some way. Me and David and Andrew, so in fact you're connected. So, coincidental maybe. Do you want to say anything, David, before we get started? Okay. Well, maybe that would be the first question I would put to the panel. Is there a role for architects in the making of cities? Anyone? Anybody want to take that?
Can I just talk about a different question that you didn't ask, but I know it was on the tip of your tongue. I'm collectively anticipating your question. But it is your question in some way. You started the conversation off today about saying, I can't remember exactly how you formulated it. Why do architects not really want to care about the city? Which is a little different than, do architects have a role to play in the city? I think you started off about with this notion that maybe architects don't much care. And then, Andy, you were very confused about why you were here, what the topic of the conference was about, and we can add, I really don't know why I'm here, let me say, I think that there are several things that are probably worth pointing out. Just the Mia and David did not present any confusion about why they were here. They knew why they were here, and they were here to present their work, and which they did with great forthrightness. So let's say in the way that the presentations unfolded, there was a certain performance of disciplinary difference. And if you start off by saying that Andy started his thing saying, I don't know what I'm here or what I'm doing, then it's clear why the landscape architects are the ones that get all the big jobs.
I said I didn't know why they were having the conference. That was.
I'm just saying, we all stage our professions and our disciplines in different ways. And I think that I'm not for a moment suggesting that either you don't in fact know why you're here or that you have any confusion about what you're doing. I think that it's a gamut, if that's a MacGuffin or a McGillicuddy or a whatever, I have no idea. But I think that that's an interesting way into the discussion, because I think that the two, so we can just start then to make some additional observations, even without thematizing them yet. Both of the, how do you like to be referred to? Landscape architect or landscape architect? So I suppose we could also have a conversation about why with urbanism you would go to the landscape architects. I mean, that's already a relatively new phenomenon. But we've got the two landscape architects, and they both, in case, unless I'm wrong, you spoke only about Los Angeles. Right? Is that right? So Andy, you spoke about a whole lot of different places. So let's just take, this is going to be so distracting, I'm sorry. So the landscape architecture, just in terms of the last hour and a half, is rooted very particularly in this place. It presents itself with a certain professional authority and conviction. It knows what it's doing. The architect is a much more portable figure, is going from here to there, asking questions in a different kind of way that are foreground the questions rather than the confidence in the answer. I mean, I think that probably, I don't have to say much more than that. You know, from that you can begin to unfold a whole series of differences in the way the world is, the way that the world is conceived. And I think that I would also add that, you know, that the term competitive disciplinarity comes to mind. Which is to say that I think historically we have tended to think about the relationship between the urbanist, the architect, the landscape architect, the sculptor, the artist. These are all things that have to do in, you know, from lessening on a kind of cultural hierarchy, but now they also have to do with money and business. Who makes what for what kind of work, who gets the big, and who's hired by whom. So the landscape architect is now, as you say, often an anchor. And I mean, I think it's a very important question for architects sitting up and taking notice, because they get hired by landscape architects, which is a completely different thing than not that long ago, where you had the architect who may or may not have hired a landscape architect. So those are questions of money and power that I think are worth contrasting with models, the kinds of cultural confidence, if not to say positivisms, that come out in the different ways the city is introduced. I have one other thing which is maybe related to this. I mean, I think it's related, but I don't know whether anybody would want to pick it up or not. It's very impressive. This, maybe it's related to this notion of confidence, like a kind of cultural confidence and authority. It's quite extraordinary that the comprehensive systematicity of the work that you both show. There's nothing that escapes it, including the future. You know, 100 years down, everything is caught, every drop of piss is collected and recycled. Nothing gets out, which is maybe a little bit why Andy gets up and then says, I'm sure I don't appear on any one of these maps. So I suppose there is a question about the critique of the master and the master plan that the work is predicated on the one hand, and the the almost overwhelming comprehensiveness of the system that is produced, first of all, by the mapping technique. The maps get bigger and bigger and bigger until they eat out the edge of the screen and nothing escapes from the map until finally the photograph comes into the map at the end. It was one of the moments where you talked about representation, that the map, even reality gets sucked into those maps. And I wonder whether, if you put it all together, whether now the architect has to be the drop of piss that gets out. I mean, because even on the Central Park, I think the landscape urbanism of the past was the way out of the city. And now it's very deeply totalizing. So I would just put that on as a challenge. Has the critique of the master plan now reinvented a master so pervasive, so all-encompassing, that it just provokes radical fantasies of escape? It has to inevitably. I mean, I don't know, what do you think?
I tell you, when I think of the master plan, I think of seeing, I'm not a illegal Sarah I'm presenting, I'm talking to illegal Sarah, really before he ended up in Michigan. I'm going to bring up this right several times, one way or another. He was from Chicago, didn't know anyone, didn't speak the language, and so produced a plan for downtown Chicago. And he showed us he, down to this every stair. And so it was this idea that one would determine exactly the arrangement of huge, what does this city look like? Give me a pencil, I'll draw exactly what that city looks like. I think what we're talking about now, and I think David David's work, David and I just finished working on a project together. I don't get to characterize either of your works like that, but the way you showed it, a lot of the comprehensiveness had to do with, let's say, understanding existing systems, and then the projections had to do with, again, sort of policies of planning. And it seems to me that there's a huge gap. The missing step is its exact instantiation. And that is the part that it seems there isn't that kind of vehicle for, at least in most American contexts, for going into a specific architecture. In other words, and then the details get filled out. I'm gonna guess a lot of the, but I was going to say, I'm gonna guess a lot of the perspectives that were shown were kind of an idea of what it might look like, right? As opposed to this is what it's going to be. But someone else is going to come in and say it's going to look exactly like this at some point. Well, and it seems like that gap is an important question.
Yeah, in the structures we created for the exhibition, if you look closely, they're actually gun barrels.
Right.
But truthfully, I mean, there's a strain of practitioner who does give something called an urban transcript or urban sprawl repair kit, and that's the new in the discussion. I mean, there is a high degree of aesthetic coordination in the urbanism, and it's not specific.
Exactly, but at that point, you see, then that's the only way to do it, is to have an explicit sort of set of rules through which you do it. Which is, so what is one of the new urbanism's biggest problems is it cannot attract any talented practitioners. Because of that reason, because you cannot produce architecture of any note within that set of prescriptions. But there isn't, their critique of sort of the sins of late modernism was when it was doing exactly the same thing. If you wanted, you had to, the building had to be like this, the cities had to be laid out like that. And that's a magnet for the untalented. And so there's a certain point, no, seriously, right? Because you can work without having, the parameters are kind of laid out for you, the rules are laid out for you. You don't actually have to be, you don't actually have to provide, architecture with a capital A, however modest, however grand.
This system as it is set up is designed precisely to say that those details are nothing but details. The details that to which you devote your life are, in this system, considered to be nothing but details.
Exactly.
So there's a big difference between drawing a city the way Ferris would draw a city, which is with a general set of outlines, the details of which are to come later, which both are important, but just we're going to come later. And putting a bunch of guns up, which is to say, I don't give a shit what the details are, because the basic that's all that matters. So while yes, I would say that your answer is a sort of weak answer in a funny way, because sure, the plans are not masterful in the sense of claiming to account for every detail.
Yeah.
But they definitely suggest that the details aren't important. And it's the rules of the system, the components of the system in a depth and detail that is almost overwhelming. And that projects itself deep into the future and is designed by definition, as I understand it. I mean, you have to really tell me if I'm misunderstanding. But what I take from this is that the system itself is totally with a deep cunning and intelligence designed to be self-perpetuating, looking forward to some moment of eventual homeostasis when it can then achieve an ideal state where it can remain forever because it is sustainable. That's the definition of it, would be that it would become homeostatic and be there forever. I would say that's the question that you would ask as an architect, because there's no question. That question is not embedded in the presentations. The presentations, qua presentations, are set up to make sure that that question does not come up, and it's just, when can I do it? How quickly can I do it? As soon as I get it done, you will get your return for every dollar you give me today. You're going to get $1.72 in perpetuity. So this is a kind of, it has absorbed the vocabulary of critique to the point that no critique is possible off into the permanent future. And I think in some way, the danger for architects is, do you want to end up with the role as simply being the fly in that ointment? Because if the job of the architect is just to be the trustor, to be the one that's questioning, I'm telling you, my feeling is that it will have been those little things when you come that fuck up your skateboard ride. No.
Okay,
They're there already,
Can we insert, this question that does architect equals to amateur entrepreneur? Because I want to go back to the first point that there's this, I've seen it in these highly imaginative presentations, and I was commented before in enemies. There's this overly emphasized optimism in the schemes, and when I look at the number of plans radiating goodness from graphics that are specifically used, that there's also a lack of a certain critique of the city itself. These are like over-optimistic plans, greenifying, this terminology I can use, the city, everybody's happy, and we will grow the food that we always need, and we will grow cows, and we'll hand drawn milk from those cows and sell it to some kind of gourmet yogurt shop, and everybody is going to make money, money is going to come, money is going to go, everything's going to be sustainable. This is really the farthest from the reality, because the cities are not like that. I'm just on my way to Rotterdam for the International Biennale, and there next week we are going to be looking at a word, the refuge. We are not talking about this in LA, but this is where we need to perhaps start to talk about these issues rather than in some kind of utopian way solve all these things from the top down and provide the politicians with a set of blueprints so they can put in their army. We know how much they love this kind of graphics. Take it with them and lay it on the table and say, this is what we are about, get behind me and you'll get the money, and especially infrastructure money. It's a big buzzword that almost every architect, and I won't make a distinction between landscape architect and architect, building architect. There seems to be a rush of these pitches. There's a overinflation of this brilliant looking good ideas out there. Like each time I look at any kind of presentation, any kind of blog that deals with the city, all I see is this wonderful ideas that is going to save us 100 years from now, 10 years from now, is going to save us now. But in fact, it's not the case. We need to talk about our essential, this perhaps might be a little planner's talk, and I won't get into it. I know some of us don't like that talk, especially Zario. But we have to stay relevant. We need to come back to here. In fact, some of these projects are overly speculative projects that are, as much as I appreciate David's homeless project that reappropriating the freeway banks, trying to get an inch of land from Caltrans. Now, where do we want to spend our efforts? That's the question.
Well, but don't you think that one of the things that's extraordinary about Mia, and I think she's just had longer at it than you have, so I'm not crediting it to your brilliance, but yours will come as well. And I think it's one of the issues that comes up with your urbanism as well. So when you say try to get an inch of land from Caltrans, you know what? I'd be happy to watch Mia go get an inch from Caltrans, and she'll get some. That's part of the issue, is that and the substance of what you're saying, the anxiety about the duping capacity of the endlessly happy cows, and although you called it stinky urbanism, there's no methane in any of these. It's really not stinky because you've got a plant there that's going to suck the stink out. I know it, and you will find one soon. I agree with that. But on the other hand, the instrumental and tactical, to use her word, success relative to other categories of effort is not to be downplayed. New urbanists, I'm assuming that this is one of the reasons that you have it up as a term, is not because you're a fan of new urbanism, but because the success of new urbanism is something that a newer urbanism is going to have to deal with. So if you take the square footage of land that Mia has reclaimed or turned into something else, or her capacity to work with agencies and bureaucracy and so on and so forth, and the degree to which the happiness is, clearly the happiness factor is the promise of happiness is a big piece of how she's managed that. But the issue is not to say don't try, but I don't think it would be not to try, but rather how do you learn from these instrumental possibilities?
So maybe if you don't mind, since we're being, my kids like to talk about me when I'm in the room in the third person. I don't mind. She says. First of all, it's interesting, and I really appreciate that people are recognizing landscape architecture as a profession that really has a lot of gumph and at this point, a lot of muscle. And, you know, speaking for my generation, you know, we kind of, I think, developed a certain sense of pride and sort of satisfaction. And part of it came from the education, and the multidisciplinary education that allowed us to operate. And it, you know, and also, you know, like stars align, I guess. I mean, you know, the problems were so big, and the issues were so big, and both David and I went to the same school, but, you know, a generation later, so to speak. And, you know, there were planners and there were designers, meaning landscape architects who thought of the bigger systems, and then designers like you walk. So you got Lori and Orhan, and then you got, you know, Carl Stein, who were really learning across disciplines. And so taking charge of projects has become something of the last 10 years, understanding our power. And really it's not whether we take it from architects, because that hasn't happened for a long time. We've taken it from engineers.
Right.
Okay, it's not like, you know, in the era of, you know, Pereira, where people, large-scale plans would be produced by the Pereira. It was, you know, the era standard was generations ago. David and I can, you know, talk about the different scales that we were going to, you know, present today, but any and all the projects I presented are actually projects on the board that are happening. You know, working on this sort of new kind of concept of what urban biodiversity is. I'm working on, I can't divulge right now who, but it's actually going to be a 160-acre experiment in the inner city with 30 scientists. So how that deploys, that little patch of 160 acre then deploys across the city is something that they're really pushing for. It's their intellectual framework that we're pushing for. And I have, you know, basically, in fact, worked with Caltrans, and I am working with Caltrans on 2 projects that, you know, we've, you know, basically negotiated, not easily. I think one of the things that's always, you know, for me, it's always awkward to talk about these smaller scale interventions that I work on, because in the end, they're not always these sexy, beautiful, you know, images that you can photograph and, you know, have on the cover of a magazine. They're literally, you know, basically sort of down to earth sort of solutions, design solutions, and they're not always sexy. You know, doing a South LA wetland that you're all going to see soon. You know, they're performative. They're performative pieces. They make a difference. They engage community. They engage, you know, at every level. But so I really think it's interesting, and I'm very interested in talking about refuges and know what they're meant. So David wants to say something.
No, I think to speak to kind of the first 2 points. One is, you know, there's kind of a crisis of representation in architecture school. I feel like the next generations of architecture students are even better poised to have perhaps more sympathetic practices that can lead, you know, multidisciplinary teams in projects other than building projects, master planning, infrastructure projects. But, you know, I hope we're kind of coming out of this period of preoccupation with digital formalism and into what I would encourage is that schools hire much more diverse faculty, geographers, physicists, and I think you start to see that happening, and because I primarily teach in architecture schools, and so it's a really, I think, great time. And then the same kind of tools that allow us to make magnificent movies of kind of floppy things that we, you know, that are created, parametric architecture, you know, are being used in GIS and being better understood by students. So I think that, and then to the issue of optimism, and not in a sense to defend the project we created, we work not trying to do a master plan at all, but we're just trying to establish a matrix of logics and then create a fiction of how it might play out. And really, a lot of the representation is a little bit more tongue-in-cheek and very kind of critical of over-optimized kind of representation. But it's actually, I've tried my best in presenting that project to convince people that it's optimistic, but it's actually quite not optimistic.
Very dystopian, actually, the project, when you get into these details. And I want to follow up on your comments, David, that that's really, in many respects, the ambition of this particular program, is to begin that discussion outside of strict disciplinary silos, but all in a way that resolves itself in the framework of architecture, and resolves itself finally in architecture. And to Sylvia's point, which was an excellent one about systems, systems don't operate independently of people. And I think one of the things that has happened is that much of the territory has been ceded in architectural discourse, either intentionally or unintentionally, to others. And we would like to start the conversation more and to give the tools to our students to proactively and aggressively engage in that discourse so that systems can evolve over time.
I'm going to, it's funny, just the other day at a faculty meeting here, I found myself defending the role of alcohol in SCI-Arc. And I'm going to defend the role of the militant center of extreme architecture at SCI-Arc, because it is.
Is that what it is?
It is what we are, and it is, I think, absolutely essential that, and I think it already is the case, that strict orthodoxies of form and approaches come and go. But I think that the promise of SCIFI is not to do another urban program in a school, in a university, in a college that can do a number of different things. But what does that, I think the questions of the relationship of urbanism and architecture are, to my mind, ought to be the burning question of SCIFI and all of the various disciplines. I mean, David brings incredible, David Bergman brings incredible resources to a lot of other people who come and do things. These are really essential. But I would really argue against it is maybe quixotic, but the idea that this is sort of funny. I mean, I can't help but think of these issues through the lens of sort of my own professional experience. Right? And absolutely, I mean, in fact, next month I'm going to be in front of the planning department of the city of Detroit presenting a general urban plan for admittedly a two-block area as opposed to a large area. And it's because of a number of reasons, because I have specific thoughts about that, and it's my job. And also because within that I've got a couple of really significant architectural pieces that are invested in it, and so the thing has to go the right way. But when I was first starting to work there, I was much more involved at all issues urban in that city, which is admittedly an incredibly frustrating place to work. It's about as dysfunctional as you can get, but involved in a number of different levels within the profession and with various community groups and city government, with a series of urban issues. And what I found simply was that took all my time. And I actually, and I take this again through my own lens, and perhaps it's a professional limitation, but simply it is such a vast and consuming set of operations that one has to undertake that I simply couldn't also do architecture on top of that. It wasn't expected that these things came together. And this goes back to what Sylvia was talking about it being, being an unimportant detail, because when you really engage in these things, I used to sit and try to argue in strange public forums for the role of, the expression of the public intellectual.
About our presence at the table. I mean, I think a lot of that has to do with the embarrassments of the last 40, 50 years, which are legitimate. Architects have done some pretty bad things to cities historically, but nonetheless, I think to deny that they participate either by choice or by fate in the making of cities, right?
Well,
we
I think
can
it's
work
really,
my
really
own
important.
way.
I think architecture's role in cities is really, really important, but very few people believe that, so.
Yeah, you're right.
There's a kind of advocacy role here, and I'm not sure who should do it, you know, it's a big job.
But I thought you were just saying that the architect works within all of these constraints and so on and so forth. And so I don't see how the architect can be both a totally weak figure and also the figure who ruined cities over the last 40 or 50 years. I mean,
Well, I think that's the schizophrenia, isn't it? I mean,
well, no, I think that that's myth-making, and so the job of the school is to not perpetuate that and figure out what happened and what they're doing now. So, I mean, when you say architects did some bad things to city, let's talk about an example. I mean, I'm not challenging you, I'm just saying, like, let's get an example and figure out, did they really do it by themselves? I mean, who is this lonely architect that went around and ruined cities like Godzilla? I mean, they don't do it by themselves, they never did it by themselves.
But this comes a little bit back to Orhan's point about the mayor and his plans for the owners. They certainly handed over some documents. I mean, we can't deny culpability, but nonetheless, I mean, I take your point.
I'm not denying culpability. I'm saying that frankly, producing Lapsarian, gill-ridden avowals of culpability actually are projections of wishes for power. I wish we had the power to be as strong as Godzilla to transform, and this is not the case.
Therefore, I'm embarrassed.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think it works. I think it works a little bit in both ways. That's all I'm saying.
Maybe there are like 3 million Godzillas in the city at the moment.
I don't know, I mean, there's some great success stories of architects rebuilding and making cities more livable, especially in South America and Central America. There's a whole legacy of architects and there was a recent GSD, a recent symposium that addressed that issue and invited former mayor from, Venezuela and in Caracas, Coratiba, and a couple of other, but the phenomenon was that these architects that become mayors, and of course they have more power than we would in an American city, we can see the story, but are to radically transform public space and infrastructure, the way the city operates is organized and that way, open space performers. So,
Let me clarify what I said about, suddenly interjected 3 million Godzillas. When I brought this up with the director of actually when I was and the conversation somewhat kind of interjected or brought in this argument that was put up by Sylvia that in 10 to 20 years, perhaps 25, that a lot of the wards are going to be fought in the cities in megalopolises, as and I said, what are our thoughts about that? And his immediate knee-jerk reaction was denial. He said, that's not going to happen. Black people are going to fight wars in their neighborhood, and the other person is going to fight wars in blah, blah. Certain areas of the city is just going to be fine and safe. So I like to bring this up. We always are looking as architects, always from this optimistic point of view, again going back to that. But do we ever look at the situation from a almost terminally disastrous point of view? Because when the door is open, we have all these other sort of forces that are coming onto the table that we have to reconsider. And perhaps then we can restructure our cities based on this sort of numbers or economic imbalances. That's why the word 3 million Godzillas or King Kong or Godzillas was very attractive to me. In fact, right now we have perhaps the half of the city is totally satisfied with what they have. And we need to go back and look at this condition that as architects, we are okay to provide this solutions based on building forms or open spaces, somewhat of naive economic models and all that. But from the point of view, we have refugees in our city, we have immigrants in our city, we have basically, I'm sorry to say this, we have slavery in this city. And as architects, where do we come in? It's going back to this, like the double-headed snake eating each other itself. What do we do? I mean, are we relevant still? Or are we powerless as a profession? Or where do we come in? I guess it's a better question. Where do we come in? And in a lot of, I was looking at some possibilities where we come in this. In times like this, perhaps architects have to pay more attention to very, like you were saying, the small scale projects and put a lot of research into this sort of
I think architects are incredibly well respected. By the way, I don't think people know what landscape architects are. And so if you were to be out in the real world, architects are held in high regard. And their opinion about how to solve a problem, if you go through City Hall and try to knock on a door of a city council office, they will know what an architect can do for them. And what can do is they can deliver a physical solution to a problem. And, then the politician can go and cut and rip. So, in a sense, and Bergman and I are working on a project where in East LA, where, you have single-family residences or at times double duplexes where 7 to 10 families live now. And, the architect's solution to this problem is, well, you can't go back to 1 or 2 units anymore. What is the new sort of model for a very, for a community where there's a large influx of immigrants and where you actually have to find a solution of multi-generational living in the same, basically confines of the site. And the most interesting part about that problem, among others, that is, of course, not healthy, and there's problems with fire, whatever, is that the sewers are 10 times over capacity and about to explode. So it is going to be stinky urbanism in East LA in no time. So I do think that architects have a tremendous ability to sort of contribute.
where they should come in with this stuff, right? I'm sincerely asking this question.
Where and when do they come into it, or where? Well, I think that, the notion, perhaps that you're not solving, the problem of housing across the basin, but that you accept small challenges and you try to be educated about how these smaller challenges are going to be cumulatively, impactful.
And one other comment, in my experience, and this gets back to the point of seeding the field, very often good ideas from architecture are not brought in to the public discourse because there is this lack of interface, effective language interface with allied and associated professions and stakeholders of public interests.
Well, but see this, and I think this is probably one of the ambitions of the program. I think architects have to learn the language of production of the city. We haven't been at the table for a while. I think, and part of what we're trying to do with the program is begin to relearn a little bit. Because I think that it is an issue of vocabulary, but it's also an issue of understanding how to instrumentalize that vocabulary. Something you said very earlier, Sylvia, about confidence, I thought was also reflected in your comment about muscle. Leverage is an ambition, I think, for all professionals, but understanding where to use it or how to acquire muscle in life, I think is something that will require some time. And new knowledge, which is, I think, what we're trying to do with this program, is start to integrate new positions and effectively kind of new confidence, I suppose, at the end, in the ability to make a change. I think, Orhan, to your point, I mean, clearly change comes with a price, but otherwise we do nothing, right? So I don't necessarily know that the kind of the position vis-a-vis the role of the architect of the city is one which we can sort of abandon ourselves to complete despair. Certainly, I think there's some things we can't work on. I don't know about urban slavery, and I'm not really sure what role architects have to play in fixing it.
No, I understand. We're not the ones. Going back to your comment the other day, saying we don't make the soup.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, we have to eat it. And the quality of it.
Well, what you're referring to is a conversation on a sort of debate I got into with Brian Finoki, who's urbanist of sorts, in San Diego recently. And the argument he made was, well, why don't you guys get into the supervisions and really, architecture should give up forms and you should become more socially committed. And I said, well, that's not in my training, and you wouldn't ask a doctor or a lawyer to do that. I mean, I think what we can do is make buildings that and we can understand how those buildings can be inserted, to your point, Andrew, into certain urban contexts, perhaps as a kind of acupuncture or acupressure. But, I think that the sort of knee-jerk reaction to kind of abandon practice in favor of social activism for me is a sort of dead end.
I think it's really, learning new languages. More newness is always good.
Sure.
I would say more newness is always good. The problem is what old forms of newness you risk giving up. I find that there's some irony in speaking about landscape architecture, for example, as the home of contemporary interdisciplinarity, for example. That's one of the things that you said. Since I would respectfully argue that the oldest